I think it's no secret if you've been following this channel by now that I love me some music anime. Given the fact that I've made an entire 2 videos on one specific series in 2 different aspects behind it, I think that would be a dead giveaway on the subject. But to those of you that were questioning it a little bit, yes, I adore musical anime. In fact, I'd argue that inputting musical aspects into anime is an easy way for me to absolutely fall in love with your series. And it's no real surprise that, as a result of that, I've loved a lot of what the last 12 months of seasonal anime has been bringing out. This trend realistically started back in the spring core or spring season of 2024, when Girls Band Cry debuted on our screens and absolutely wrecked shop not just within its individual season, but absolutely dominated the yearly anime rankings of the year by the time they came around for 2024. And for good reason as well, as the plot was one of the more mature takes on band animes in a very long period of time. The drama within it being seen as not being too melodramatic, while allowing you to properly be able to feel for the characters that the story focuses heavily on at times. While it did also help that Toei Animation put their focus on it at a time where they were mainly known for Pretty Cure and putting all of their eggs into the Dragon Ball Daima basket for the year, one can look at Garukura's success, especially given it was written by veteran Juki Hanada, and given that her pedigree has been focused on examples from the past, such as most of Love Live's animes, alongside some heavy hitters in series such as Sound Euphonium, Excel World, and even more recently before this with Steins Gate Zero. You can feel the energy come across in its presentation as much as it did with its music. And speaking of the music of this band anime, the band that the series primarily focuses on, Toganashi Togeari, and comprised in real life by all of the voice actors who play the main 5 girls in the anime itself, all makes up some incredible songs as a result of their combined efforts. Which also helps given that they were actual vocalists and musicians who had been properly auditioned for the roles as unknowns beforehand, to the point where their details on any page regarding Garukura has them with nothing to show. But the whole point of bringing up Girls Band Cry is to say that this is where I feel like the revival of band music anime properly started for one reason or another within the last year. If not for the critical adoration of Garukura, but for how much we have severely been missing band anime up until this point. I mean, 1 season ago, earlier this year, we had a completely amazing blend of band anime and S-class anime more or less take the stage as one of the more bigger examples of subverting all kinds of expectations both within its plot, as well as within the context of watching the show itself. As Rock as a Lady's Modesty showed this year how you can blend 2 different genres into one side of the coin, and come out with something just as amazing as Garukura. With the way that it has a serious element hiding behind the antics on display with its main duo at first, with Lilisa and Otaha being 2 sides of the same coin in terms of their posh exteriors and how they both crash into each other with their more brash attitudes colliding when playing music together. Later expanding out that dynamic when the likes of gender-bending ball of anxiety Tina joins the fray, and later with rival for Lilisa and Tamaki joining the group later in the series. It makes it clear from the jump that while it is 100% trying to do comedy bits for the sake of subverting your expectations of what to expect with this, like a predecessor in K-On! Some years prior, that it will also use to reel you in for more engaging moments within its back half to make you care for all involved. Alongside that, it utilizes Class S elements found in anime such as Marimite, Otoboku, and even to a degree in Strawberry Panic to be able to properly reward those who are familiar with the genre with some moments here and there, when they do finally focus hard on the Class S politics that surround most animes that take inspiration from the above to such good effect. While also being able to show audiences who haven't had much experience with the genre what it can be about, so they don't exactly feel all that left out as a result. But you're probably looking at the title of the video we're on here today and thinking to yourself, Chloe, get to the point already. What exactly are you trying to do here with this point? And the answer is simple. While Girls Band Cry started off this trend very well, and Rock as a Lady's Modesty continued said trend excellently this year as well, and even other anime this year such as Princession Orchestra have shown what a series with familiar aspects in the same vein as Symphogear, fitting that given it's made by the same team who did it, are all making great examples of this trend of either having band anime or music elements in their animes making a comeback. I personally think, however, There's been one anime above all else in the past 18-month period, or hell, this year period, that has managed to be the shining example above all that banned anime is truly back. Ave Mujica, the die is cast. Overall, the 7th anime project in the franchise known as Bang Dream Girls Band Party, Ave Mujica focuses on the chaotic relationships and drama of the titular 9th band of the Bandori franchise, watching as their meteoric rise to the top has seemingly begun to crumble underneath the weight of their interpersonal drama and issues. It deals with a whole gambit of mental health problems, traumas, and other awful stuff that makes you wonder if this group should actually stay together by the end of the series run, or if they should break up for the sake of their own mental health. But by the end convinces you, the viewer, that they are arguably one of the best and most complex bands of the franchise, and that makes their bond inseparable. And holy shit, this series in particular is a fucking ride from beginning to end, while also giving you some incredible songs to boot from its 13-episode run from earlier this year. Personally speaking, however, I think it might be the best band anime period of the last 5 years, and practically cemented the return of the band music genre entirely, in my opinion. And alongside that, it brought me back into Bang Dream as a franchise as a whole, as I'd been invested into the franchise since 2018, but had dwindled out a bit around the time that the likes of Morphonica and Raise Sulin were about to debut in the franchise. That's about 2021 to 2022 for those not as heavily invested in the series. So the fact that this series was the one to get me thrown back into its clutches has to mean it's amazing, right? Well, that'd be a half-truth, as while Ave Mujica did drag me in by my feet, its prequel series actually did a lot of the heavy lifting before it. Yes, Ave Mujica is a direct sequel to the series of the franchise that came before it, Bang Dream, It's MyGO, focusing on the 8th band of the franchise that debuted a few years prior, the titular MyGO. And really, a lot of the things that Ave Mujica and even other band animes we've talked about up until this point, like the darker themes, the more mature aspects to the relationship dynamics within the bands, and especially the focus on 3D CG for pretty much all of the animation segments, if not the entire series, I'd argue all of that comes back around to It's MyGo's success as much as it does for Ave Mujica, or even any of the others mentioned before, in the same vein that while K-On! Had been the juggernaut of the late 2000s, early 2010s, that it's arguable without the success of Beck or Nana before it to pave the way, it would have been as successful as it could have been. In the case of MyGo for Ave Mujica, and really every other anime we've talked about to this point, however, MyGo practically did the exact same thing for them, but especially for Ave Mujica, as it laid the foundational groundwork for the structure of which Mujica's primary issues come from and, being honest here, put a lot of focus onto as a result. For some context of what we're going to discuss here, main characters of Ave Mujica's anime get introduced throughout this as former members of a group known as Kreishik, whose breakup as a band is literally the catalyst event for the events of MyGo, as lead members Sakiko and Mutsumi were members of the group. And while MyGo's anime focuses on the other members of the now former Kreishik and Soyo, whose interpersonal want to reform Kreishik is part of the drama once it reaches its second act, and certain moments infamously make her lose her shit at the idea her plans of reforming the group have gone off in smoke because— yeah, that, what she said. And the resulting fallout of that entire situation leads to not only struggles, but eventually MyGo coming together as a band fully to be able to work together as a unit, but solidifies Sakiko's resolve to want to move on fully from Kreishik, leading to her forming a different group altogether to want to forget about her trauma surrounding the group, leading to the formation of Ave Mujica. MyGo's anime ends with this stinger of Ave Mujica's debut performance as a group, obviously being a tease for their solo anime which would debut a year and a half after MyGo's conclusion. So with that bit of backstory behind it, let's get into what exactly I love about Ave Mujica the Die is Cast, and not only I feel revitalized a lot of my feelings on band anime, but also on Bandori in general. First off is the story behind it, which, as I mentioned above, relies crucially on details from It's MyGo as the focal point, as without that context behind it, while you could still enjoy it, a lot of the heart that comes from the later moments of the series arguably doesn't feel it hit as hard if you don't have the context of MyGo behind it. It picking up a few months after the end of MyGo, and Ave Mujica taking the stage as the next big thing in-universe for Bandori artists, we get introduced to the other members of the group we already know of Sakiko and Mitsumi through their strifes in MyGo, but were later introduced to Umiri, Yahara, Uika Misumi, and Yamu Yutenji, as well as all 5 collective alter egos of Oblivionis, Mortis, Timoris, Dolores, and Amoris, each representing their own interpersonal strifes, both as a way for them to be able to try and confront their own issues within the band, as it is Sakiko milking their traumas for her own toxic level codependency by proxy with the band. This is further incited by the interpersonal drama about what everyone wants the band to be to them, and in particular some members' desires clashing, mainly Nyamu and Sakiko, as Nyamu wants to use it as a means to an end for her fame, and Sakiko is wanting to keep using it for her own trauma dumping, and end up causing friction as their success grows. This affecting the other members of MyGO, but in particular Mutsumi, who is torn between who she wants to be aligned with, and is especially being guilt-tripped by Sakiko due to the previous issues surrounding Kreishik, and feeling responsibility for what happened due to a comment she made which triggered the breakup to happen in the first place. And this in turn starts one of the more interesting aspects of Ave Mujica's story, but arguably one a lot of people would have had some issues with it as it pertains to a mental disorder that many have felt is already misappropriated in media as it is, but I'd argue is used to some better effect within Mutsumi's storyline. See, Mutsumi is revealed in this part of the MyGO Mujica storyline to have dissociative identity disorder, and in reality has an alter, that being of a differing headmate or personality living within her known as Mortis, the same as her stage name in the band, making us the audience question who is the real Mutsumi really is on stage as a part of Ave Mujica. In fact, Mutsumi's entire arc within the story of Ave Mujica retroactively made her one of my favorites within the MyGO Mujica section, specifically because of how it developed from the beginning of Kreishik's breakup to her taking arguably a more full-on role with the matters she is flung into with Ave Mujica's strife. And nowhere is this more prevalent than with the eternal struggle between her and Mortis, which arguably does take a few liberties with the whole evil alter trope rearing its ugly head, as it unfortunately is persistent to do in most cases where DID is shown in media like this. But I'd argue anyway, like how similar animes have done so with showing certain levels of DID like Lane before it, it's less a case of showing Mutsumi's more darker side to her, and more showcasing the protector alter role to the audience, as it's made clear in Mortis' actions when she is around that she actually does like a lot of the members of Ave Mujica, and even some members of MyGO. The only one she doesn't fucking like is Sakiko. But to be fair, between everything Sakiko does in Ave Mujica, and even to a degree in MyGO, it's no surprise that she ends up being despised by Mortis. Realistically speaking, not many people would fuck with her like that if they weren't under an obligation to do so. Hell, even the audience was like, wait, we're rooting for Sakiko in this one? And went, nah, bitch, it's the Mortis show now, fuck this bitch Sakiko. And at the very beginning, anyway, if only because Sakiko was not under any circumstances a likable main character by any stretch of the imagination by this point. Some would argue this makes it really hard to get into the story of Ave Mujica because, as a result, with a series focusing on such a bunch of dysfunctional girls whose main goals really don't align with each other half of the time, and some of them are either so self-centered or downright actually the worst, then why would you root for them to succeed? Well, see, that's the part of the magic of Ave Mujica's story, as, without spoiling it, the first half really doesn't focus on them as a band so much as it is them trying to figure out who they are outside of Sakiko's whole vision of Ave Mujica being a vehicle for her to process trauma with, eventually leading to them sorting out their issues and exposing some secrets along the way with which some changes some dynamics both within and outside the band forever. And to that end, I'd recommend both Ave Mujica as much as I would you watch MyGO before it, for the best viewing experience possible, as without one or the other you don't really properly get the full experience of one of Bandori's best storylines, period. Also because there's a third series in this continuous story coming out which eventually will focus on both bands together again, so it's very much recommended you enjoy both for the bigger picture at hand. But of course, that's only one part of why this band anime works so well. The other part, obviously, is the music within it as a result. And for fans of visual K music and J-rock subcultures like I am, you'll love what this band has to provide even if you're not a Bandori stan, as it immediately starts off with a massive bang with the 1-2 punch of the show's opening and ending themes in Kill Kiss and Georgette Me, Georgette You, both of which showcase the polar opposites ends of the spectrum of what to expect from the Ave Mujica catalog of songs within Bandori, as much as they are solo efforts from the artists themselves. with Kill Kiss being an absolute banger that sets the visual K-Styles vibes off right, adding into that the visuals of the opening that could double as a high-concept music video in universe as it does an opening which gives us some foreshadowing of each member's story arcs, which tied into their titles and names gave a lot of people reasons to try and decipher what their arcs were going to be. Granted, a lot of it was a bunch of red herrings for what the actual story arcs would entail for them, but it did make the weekly watching experience of Ave Mujica a lot more fun as a result. Seriously, there were some wild as hell reactions and furies week to week with this show. It was a fucking time! And Georgette Me, Georgette You, while the visuals of its ending may be a bit more static for some audiences and maybe a downer as a result, has some of the best examples of how the voice of Uika, or Dolores, absolutely kills it in the role, as she goes from the soft-spoken vocals at the beginning and its more somber bits, to absolutely belting it out in the chorus. And the minute those drums and guitars kick in, fuck me dead, it's a rarity in the case of it being an ending that I simply have never skipped in my viewings of Ave Mujica, because it kicks too much ass for me to even consider doing it, and I'm not going to be surprised if it's on my end of year most played list of single songs, because holy fuck have I heard it a lot in the past year since I first watched this show. And then comes the insert songs which have been attributed to the band Ave Mujica during its release, starting with the eponymous song from their debut EP back in 2023, which played during their debut episode in MyGO's 13th episode. In universe, this being the first song that audiences were introduced to as much as the audiences watching at home were introduced to for the band, I can see not just from a visual production standpoint, but from the musical styling point that this is one hell of a way to kick off a band's run with the musical style, absolutely working overtime with the symphonic aspects to its style. Not to mention, what would become a staple of future songs with circus lay motifs being used in the pre-chorus to really bring some more original flavor not just to Ave Mujica as a band in general, but most Bandori songs of this era alongside it. Then comes a bit of a curveball in Imprisoned X, a mostly acoustic ballad which in story is a crucial story element which helps bring the band back together as a result in its later half. While its lyrics do cause some obvious tension between two members of the band in the process, which, given the subject matter involved in it and the memes that came about as a result of it, yeah, nobody would blame anyone for thinking weirdly of anyone having this song dedicated to them, given the subject matter is very, we'll lock you up forever out of love levels of interest in this subject matter. However, the vocals by Uika and Dolores, once again, are immaculate, and the instrumental is arguably one of the more unique of the songs attributed to the band. So I'd argue it makes it stand out very well when the rest of the songs could arguably blend together if on a rotation if you're not careful. A good example of that, honestly, is Crucifix X, the song played in the same episode as Imprisoned, almost perfectly showing off what I mean when I say that the music of Ave Mujica can sometimes be a bit samey if you're not careful about it. While it's certainly not bad by any stretch of the imagination, I'd even argue that Crucifix does have some really good instrumental moments to it, and the background vocals in the second verse and chorus really do bring out a lot of really good stuff within it. Honestly, if it were for the fact that the song was played at a crucial turning point episode concert, I'd honestly have forgotten about it compared to the next few songs to cover from the final concert episode at the end of the series, which honestly is banger after banger. The first one being Octogram Dance, the song that starts off their big return concert, and like, holy shit, is it a banger to start off said concert with. From a chorus in the opening vocals that comes back throughout the song, English for days within the lyrics, which is a bonus point for Visual K in my opinion, all of that capped off with arguably some of the hardest instrumentals of their entire discography, mixed in with some hella good vocals again from Uika. Yeah, it's a top 3 song for absolute certainty. This is then followed on by Alter Ego, which somehow manages to top Octogram in terms of its harder hitting instrumental, and goes for increasing the BPM, which is just as good at making it all the more intense and for good measure. As, with it being sandwiched between two incredible songs in the same episode, it makes the job of trying to not fall in the same trap that Crucifix had before it feeling a bit too samey compared to the rest of the songs in their discography very hard. But then Uika gives us a little throughout the song, and my dumbass gay heart just falls in love with the song alongside her glorious vocals, which basically blend with the more intense background to match it over time. And it's actually a very damn good song, which amazingly doesn't get drowned out by its competition in the same episode. But given what comes at the end of the series run and the most recent Ave Mujica song featured in the series to this point, everything else is arguably just child's play. And then the fucking show ends with us giving us Musica Callistis, the arguable best song of not just the insert songs, but I'd argue of the entire catalogue of Ave Mujica entirely to this point, as it takes the rushing BPM increase from Alter Ego, the orchestral and choral aspects from previous parts of the discography such as Octogram and Georgette, alongside all of it as well, manages to blend it together with the best lyrics and performances by Uika one final time that absolutely send your soul into space by the end, as it's very fitting of it being the first hopeful sounding song from the band, having finally gone through the trials and strife of being a band together and reuniting. And honestly, I think of it as the most perfect example of what Ave Mujica's next era could bring leading into its next series alongside MyGO going forward. As compared to the more darker style of the songs that came before it, it feels like it could be leading into a brighter future not just for the band members individually, but the band in general going forward, similar to how MyGO eventually found their way in a story as a mirror between the two. And that's pretty much all of the music of Ave Mujica to talk about. So far, anyway. There's always new Bandori songs coming out, and they even have a new song that I'll wait to cover when MyGO Mujica's third season comes out in a year or two, to be fair to it. But, all in all, I'd argue personally that the collective combination of the story of the band alongside the music that is presented within it makes it one of the best band animes in recent memory, and arguably alongside MyGO has led to the revival of band music anime in general with how much it's helped band anime since come out of the woodwork. And like I said before, with animes with songs in their DNA outside of band animes have been making a comeback with Princession Orchestra bringing back the Battle Maidens, singing their fight songs vibes by way of Precure and Symphogear being blended together. So I'd argue it's making big waves in many ways with the genre as a result. Hell, within the same season that Ave Mujica aired earlier this year, you have examples such as Maebashi Witches by Bandai's animation studio that had a focus on magical girl anime blending with idol anime by way of having them have insert songs every other episode as a method of encapsulating the story arc for each character. By no means is this me saying that this is some kind of trend that is making a full-on comeback like we saw in the post-K-On! Period of anime in the 2009 to 2012 era. That's long gone by this point that we've discussed about on this channel. But I'd personally argue that it's at least a starting point for what could eventually be the revival of band music anime and music hybrid anime once again. Again, with the trend of nearly one per season coming up for the past 18 months, this has to account for something coming back around in the favor of it again, and honestly, I am happy to see it make a return as it has been deeply missed. And if it does mean, in fact, that we're going to be seeing more of that kind of trend with the likes of Princession and the like come back around, then catch me campaigning for Kyoto Animation to finally give us the K-On! Shuffle anime adaptation at some point. Given that they want to go back to the well again for Nichijo's follow-up in City, one has to think maybe that has to be next on their agenda. But hey, another topic for another time. For now, however, Ave Mujica didn't just bring me back into the game for band anime again, but it got me all the way back in for Bang Dream as a franchise as well, as I managed to also get deeply into its gacha rhythm game all over again, in particular knowing that the members of MyGO were added into the game as well. While Ave Mujica as a band has yet to be added, a lot of their songs have been put into the game by this point. I get the feeling that the massive influx of fans coming in as a result of MyGO Mujica's anime success speaks volumes to how effective a well-written anime and hella good music can truly be. And I cannot wait for the third season of this journey and the music that comes out of it to come out as well. And honestly, I kind of want to talk to you all more about stuff like Bandori, because I feel like so little creatives online truly do give this series the level of credit that Love Live or Idolmaster is given to this day. And as a fan of all three, I want to be able to give Bandori a bit more love down the line. So if you liked me gushing at length about this, maybe expect it more later on down the track. For now, however, I'm hoping that the world of Ave Mujica leaves the door open for more music anime, or music-adjacent anime to be made in the future, and hoping we get more success stories out of it as a result, and don't be surprised if it makes it into my top 10 animes of the year as a result as well. This video was made possible through supporter patrons like the ones you're seeing on screen right now. If you like videos like this one and others on this channel, please consider supporting them via the Patreon link and subscribing to the channel. Thank you for the time, and catch you later.